Good day. My name is Park Ranger Michael Callahan, and welcome to this segment of History from St. Paul's. Today, we'll explore the life of Civil War veteran Jacob Ham, who is buried in our historic cemetery. Jacob Ham was born in Columbia County, New York around 1840. By 1860, he was a farm laborer and was married to Melinda Jennings, with whom he had 9 children. Jacob remained in New York for the first year of the Civil War. Around 13 August 1862, he enlisted in Company G of the 128th New York Volunteer Infantry. Leaving behind his 17-year-old wife, who was expecting their first child. His regiment, the 128th, also known as Old Steady, was raised primarily in the Hudson River counties of Dutchess and Columbia. During the course of the war, the 128th saw more widespread service than most New York regiments, seeing service in Louisiana, Virginia, Georgia, and the Carolinas. By the time the 128th was mustered out of service in 1865, it had lost nearly half of its original strength. Jacob and his fellow recruits received initial training at Camp Kelly in Hudson, New York. On 5 September, after a parade through the city, the 128th boarded the steamer Oregon and were transported first to New York City, then to Baltimore, Maryland, where they received further training at Camp Millington. In December, the 128th were assigned to the Department of the Gulf, commanded by General Nathaniel Banks. The assignment of New York regiments to the Western Theater of Operations was not common at this time, with most New York units seeing service in Virginia. It was also not a sought-after assignment due to the high incidence of disease caused by malaria, typhoid, and other illnesses. But for a year and a half, the 128th served primarily in Louisiana, participating in the siege of Port Hudson in May of 1863, where their commander, Colonel David Cowles, was killed. In the spring of 1864, the 128th participated in the Red River Campaign, an ill-fated attempt to seize more territory in West Louisiana from Confederate forces, and then attempt to move U.S. forces into Texas. The 128th covered the retreat of U.S. units at the conclusion of the expedition. During its time in Louisiana, the 128th suffered significant losses of men killed and wounded in action, as well as deaths from disease. As well as participating in the fighting with Company G, Jacob also served as one of the company's cooks. In July of 1864, the 128th was transferred to the Eastern Theater of Operations, where they served in General Philip Sheridan's Shenandoah Valley campaign, participating in the Battle of Cedar Creek in October of that year. In January of 1865, the 128th were again ordered south to Savannah, Georgia, and in March joined General William Tecumseh Sherman's army in the final phase of the North Carolina campaign, which resulted in the surrender of Confederate General Joseph Johnston's forces in April. The 128th then returned to Georgia, where it mustered out of service in Augusta on 12 July 1865. Jacob Ham returned home to his wife and child. They continued to live in Columbia County, where Jacob again employed as a farmer. More children added to the family, and by 1880 there were 9 children Jacob employed as a blacksmith. Jacob seems to have had a relatively uneventful transition back to his life as a civilian, with no serious indications of physical or emotional problems, as many of his former comrades had encountered. Melinda died in 1888, and Jacob married Eliza Rogers, a woman 23 years younger than himself. With this marriage, 6 additional children were added to the family, 3 of whom were from Eliza's previous marriage. The Hams continued to reside in Columbia County. Eliza passed away in 1917. Jacob himself was growing older, and at that time there were no assisted living facilities or nursing homes as we now know them. There were homes for former soldiers, but following the death of his second wife, Jacob made the decision to move in with his granddaughter and her husband to a residence in Union Avenue in Mount Vernon, New York around 1920. Jacob remained there until his death on 7 November 1925 at the age of 85. He was survived by 7 of his children. Jacob Ham was buried in the city section of St. Paul's Cemetery a few days later, with his grave marked with a veteran's headstone. Thank you for being with us today, and join us again for more History from St. Paul's.